welcome to the first episode of our new podcast. This first episode is an introduction to our services and how we came to work together to bring healthcare to our homeless community. I am your host, Sarah Jackson. I'm the Nurse Practitioner and Project Lead for the Bromley Homeless Health Team, and I'm joined by Kim Sutton and Dr Hasib, who will introduce themselves and talk about how the service came together. Can I pass on to Kim?
Hi, I'm Kim Sutton and I'm the Services Manager for Bromley Homeless Charity. This project was something I thought about for many, many years and wanted it to become what it has become. And I obviously had to go out, call out to people, and one of those people that responded was Dr Hasib. Without his response and his proactiveness, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I'll now hand over to Dr Hasib.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Sarah. I'm Hasib Ur-Rub. I am a GP by trade and have worked in Bromley as a GP for the past 35 years, so I have some understanding of Bromley and its demographics. And I became interested in this particular project when Kim reached out to me, I think somewhere in the middle of 2019, with a request to say, would we be interested in supporting Bromley Homeless Shelter, as it was then, in helping manage some of the illnesses that they are clearly seeing in clients who are attending their shelter. And after a few conversations, and not very many in actual fact, I was really sold on the idea, and I thought this was a really laudable service to try and get involved in, because these are amongst the most vulnerable group of people in our population. And that's really what made me get involved. We thought about it, and then over a period of a few weeks, perhaps a few months, we actually designed what we might be able to do. Now, we have to remember that this is entirely unfunded, so this was a purely volunteer-based setup. The charity were fantastic in offering us whatever we needed to help run the service. And I have to say a big thank you to Kim, who's a service manager, and also to the trustees and the other staff who work here, who were absolutely incredible at supporting us in running the service. So this was very much a mutual thing. So we designed a service on this voluntary basis, whereby we would come during the winter months when illness was at its most critical, particularly for the homeless as the temperatures drop. And we designed a service that would run just for 1 hour on a Thursday evening, and it was based at the church from where the homeless shelter operate. And to my astonishment, the uptake was fantastic. It's very slow to begin with, understandably. A lot of the clients who use the service are very suspicious of authority, and it takes time for them to get to know individuals and trust individuals. But I was really quite astonished at how there was a need, and it was an unmet need, because these were people who wouldn't go elsewhere for their health care and were struggling. So I was surprised at this, and the project in the first winter I thought was a success. We only did it for 2 months, the most critical period over that winter. I think it was December and January. And the following year we increased it to 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, up until we've got the current service up and running. And it was during COVID that it really struck me as to what we had done and what we had to offer. If we look at 2019, pre-COVID, none of the clients wanted any vaccinations because they were very dubious about this. They had vaccine hesitancy, as the term became well known during COVID. But 2020 and the winter of 2020 started to change all of that. And we were able to talk to the clients and describe to them what COVID was and what the impact of COVID could be, and that vaccination could be a lifesaver. And I think slowly we managed to convince people that this was really important. And all you needed in that group was one person to put their hand up and say, I'll have that vaccine. And so it escalated. And we were doing in the order of 50 vaccinations. Now, these vaccinations were in people who would otherwise not have been vaccinated, who almost certainly would have been a very high-risk group for contracting COVID and therefore their health being severely impacted, if not leading to death. So I think this was really important, and that to me was the one outstanding thing that we managed to achieve. And of course it's rolled on since then. And we managed to do lots of other things, of course, as well. But that's the one thing that said to me, my goodness, what is it that led Kim to talk to us in 2019 that helped us set up the if you like, the practice run, and then when there was the real need in 2020 and 2021, we had a system that allowed us to be there for people.
And I'll just interject there because it wasn't as simple as Dr Hasib said. He actually came in and sat down with them and he got asked this question, is this an extinction event? And he had to give an explanation because none of us knew. He gave an explanation to them that they understood and they all started putting their hands up for this vaccine. He had to sit down while they were all eating and they were swearing and shouting. And of course, at that time, the homeless population were at the bottom of the list for vaccines as well. They were not going to hand out vaccines to the homeless. It was only that we got told the day before they would be included. So yes, we got one of them contracted COVID. Out of all those that we vaccinated, only one of them and it was a very mild case. They were isolated in the hotel, but one of them. And that was because Dr Hasib, in his way that he doesn't turn up in a suit and a white coat. Just get off his bike, he'd get off his bike and come in, all sweaty and grubby, and sit down with them. And they just felt like he was one of them. And it probably the best thing I ever did was contacting you. Because everyone else, we've had a couple of others that have turned up with their scrubs on. I'm going, you need to take all that off. But Dr Hasib listened, and that's why it worked. Because I'm not the medic here, he was. And I'll never forget that day sitting there. We had some junior GPs sitting there with their laptops open, punching everyone's name, and they were queuing up. And everyone got vaccinated. Their volunteers, everyone. People were crying as they were leaving because they were not offered the vaccines by anywhere else apart from here. That's why it was important. It was a moment for us, I think.
It was. I think just to give a little more context to the fact that we weren't a priority group. So those people experiencing homelessness were not a priority group, and I had the privilege and opportunity to be sitting on groups that were talking about the COVID vaccination programme within Bromley, and we would often hear that government has not prioritised this group, therefore we cannot vaccinate this group, because the security around vaccines at that time was incredible. It was so difficult to actually waste one drop of vaccine or to give one vaccine to someone who wasn't eligible for that vaccine. But through our constant awareness program about the vulnerability of this group and the need to put this message up the chain of command to the Department of Health and to the government, I think eventually things did change. Whether those were the things that led to that change, I don't know. But I'd like to think that people like us working, Kim and I working within this charity, and others who are doing similar things somewhere else, perhaps maybe the message was finally being heard.
So in terms of this partnership that both Bromley Homeless Charity and Bromley GP Alliance getting together in terms of helping bring healthcare to the forefront for the homeless population, for those experiencing homelessness, in other areas which I'm involved with or I talk to, they've got a health team quite separate from housing, from help in terms of that, and it's not such a smooth joint process. What do yourselves think in terms of the partnership that you've created, in terms of why this model, for instance, works quite? It works very well.
Because you can't work in silos. Health and homelessness, they work hand in hand. One brings about the other, and vice versa. And I know that after 20 years of doing this job. The NHS everywhere in the country is excellent. You can walk in and into A&E and you know you're going to get looked after and seen and dealt with. But actually the truth of it is, many homeless people will only turn up there when they're in crisis. By the time they've got there, they've probably got comorbidities, so much stuff going on, mental health, they've lost their home, they've lost their job, there's so much going on. But that's separate to health. And, you know, medics are doing that job, they can't do that job as well. The welfare job is not something they can do. But what I did find when I was doing a similar programme at King's, at St Thomas's, that if you work closely together, you get better results. You've got to be hand in hand. You've got to be in the same building. Sending emails to someone and then they respond in 2 weeks is no good for someone that's rough sleeping, who's got X amount of things wrong with them. That's what I knew. I needed someone to say, yeah, this is good, and you need to be in the same building, which is what Dr Hasib got to see with working on the winter night shelter, you know, and it has to be a partnership that works well, but the model itself should be rolled out because it works. And what we do here is we do prevention as well as relief. So if someone walks in, you'll come down to me and say, Kim, I've got this person, and when we look at the combined data that we both have on that person, then I'll go to Bromley and go, this person is vulnerable, more vulnerable than a normal individual on the street. This person needs to be housed. And I don't think we failed since you started working here. There isn't one. I looked at the data on Friday. In all of the patients/clients that we've worked on together, there's only one that there was a slip up with.
Oh dear.
But that wasn't us. That was a hospital that done an unsafe discharge, and we had to deal with the fallout.
Yeah.
But actually, everything else we've not failed on, which tells me that it works. And that's why you've got to work together with your local community and do that. You know, not everyone's responsive to it. Not everyone wants to do it. You've got to have someone like Dr Hasib who done it. They done it for free. Remember, this was a voluntary. You know, I can imagine we had GPs coming in after they'd done a full day's work and spending an hour here before going home. You got to find the right people to work with. But I think if you put it out there and you're passionate about it and people listen, then it works. And actually, this project itself, which should become a service without question, is much, much cheaper than having a separate GP surgery, putting lots of medics and everyone else in it.
So in terms of this starting off as you say, a voluntary drive during a winter clinic only, and I believe it started with just a doctor and a nurse coming, and then voluntary, as you said, people come in, they've got multiple comorbidities, they've got multiple issues, they're not coming in with just one. So I believe yourselves got podiatry involved, drug and alcohol service and mental health services involved as well. So it's a very multidisciplinary approach. So for other services in other areas that are listening, thinking, okay, actually what I'm hearing sounds gold standard service in my view. How did yourselves come about getting because it's a 3-year project that we're doing and you guys got funding. Where did the transition come from once a week in winter only to how did that process
I'll let you take this over.
It's a difficult question, and I don't know whether I know the actual answer to this. However, I think one of the things I was saying a little earlier was that we increased the project or the winter illness clinic from 2 months to 3 months to 4 months. And the reason we did that was because we each year recognised there was a need, and each year we recognised that more and more people were wanting to come in to have support. And I think we also recognise that actually, okay, winter is a time of crisis. Temperatures drop significantly. There's a lot more winter illness around. However, illness is across the whole of the year. There are 365 days most years, and there is illness around every single one of those days. And we started to recognise that actually people needed help. Not everyone who was coming to the winter illness clinic was coming because they had a winter illness. They saw the opportunity of a health clinic, and for them it didn't matter that it was related to winter type illness or something else. Actually, we started to recognise and see people wanting help for mental health, drugs and alcohol. Hence we got drugs and alcohol and mental health involved, and we must thank those two agencies in particular for the fact that they turned up week after week after week for those clinics. The other support that we had was a little bit more sketchy, but in terms of who was there, hardcore, it was drugs and alcohol and mental health. So both of those providers in our area should be commended. But just to go back a touch, without the vision and determination and hard work, this wouldn't have happened. And that vision, determination and hard work primarily came from Bromley Shelter as it was. And I don't think we should forget that. I was simply approached, and a good sales pitch was thrown at me, and it worked. As to, you asked the question that Kim responded to earlier, which is, why is this successful? I think health and homelessness are really closely associated. Poor health leads to, in some instances, people becoming homeless, and homeless people have poor health. And we can talk about the statistics of poor health in homeless people, if you like. But I think there is an intrinsic relationship between the two. And where you have a service running on its own health, I don't think we would have had anywhere near the success that we've had in getting people coming in through the front door and also wanting to be vaccinated, because we would have done it in a different way. Whereas here, working with Shelter, where they had a relationship with the clients, they could come in, I could join them at the table when they were eating and have that conversation. It wasn't a formal PowerPoint presentation, it wasn't me standing up in front of them, it was sitting amongst them and having that conversation, which is a difficult thing to do in another setting. And in terms of the model, why does this model work? I think there is evidence out there that says, if you look at models where you have a dedicated service for homeless health, particularly in association with a organisation such as the charity, then it is going to be more successful. We know that. I think if you park the service in general practice, it would work a little bit, but the clients tell us of the barriers that there exist. And in terms of statistics, 50% of clients who might attend a GP surgery with a on-the-day need are declined registration. We know that. So that in itself is an issue. So you're missing 50% of those people who need treatment on the day if you send them to general practice as it is now, because the stats show us that. We also know that if patients attend hospitals and they get admitted, that there are a lot of unmet health needs there, and those unmet health needs result in people not achieving the well-being that they deserve. And then 50% of those who've been admitted are often discharged back to the street or to inadequate accommodation, which again just keeps the circle going. And I think these things matter. And the one thing that we've done jointly together is we've understood the sort of trauma informed practice that we need to deliver. And I think that's really poorly understood in other organisations. No, maybe that's unfair. Maybe healthcare does understand that, but maybe it just doesn't have the time to be able to deliver that. But I think that trauma part is really important. And I think that's why we've worked well together. We have together understood the traumas and then been able to work our way through some of the issues that people have had.
It's worked well because we understood it. I understood the homeless perspective. Dr Hasib understood the medical perspective, and then you come together and then you produce a service that we produced here, which I do believe is gold standard, and should be rolled out. More people should see it in its working and come and see it.
And I think actually the feedback is critical in this. So Kim can talk about it from her perspective as service manager. I can talk about it from what I think we're delivering. But actually, the people that matter are the people who are the users of the service. And I think the feedback from the users of the service is amazing. And we know that we were fortunate enough to have a visit from our local ICB, the Integrated Care Board. And I think one of the clients very clearly said, I have been homeless for a long time. I have been in a variety of different areas, Westminster, Chelsea, Fulham, other parts of London, but never has he experienced the level of understanding and care that's provided from the service that we have run. So I think it's critical that this service continues, and I think it's really important that we start to really address the inequalities that exist. We talk a lot about inequalities, within healthcare particularly, but actually we really need to deliver on those healthcare and inequalities that exist, and they most certainly exist for the homeless.
Thank you very much for your time today and introducing the service, which is the Bromley Homeless Health Team. So at the moment it's literally just myself as a nurse practitioner from a health point of view, but I'm based at the charity, so I'm teamed with the charity, so automatically when your clients come in, they've got that automatic trust for me as a nurse coming to see me, whereas actually if they go elsewhere there is that trust barrier and things where they have had trauma in the past of going to an appointment. And a lot of people actually come to me and they say, and it's been said multiple times, you treated me like a human being. I actually felt listened to. That's the benefit of having this service, is I've got the time as well, and yourselves decided not to put a doctor into the role because of the hierarchy that these clients feel and everything. So from my point of view, it's a very worthwhile role. I think we need more people advocating for this group because they don't voice it themselves and they do just neglect themselves, and because they need people like yourselves fighting for them. So thank you very much for starting this project, which we're hoping will come into an entire service and be ongoing throughout the years. But it's been a pleasure talking to you both this morning.